afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the closing plenary of today. I promise you we're not going to take as long as we took in the welcoming plenary session this morning, but we have very interesting speakers lined up for you to come and share with you their ideas as to how we can move going forward with regards to water and sanitation in the continent. We in the morning spoke about issues such as the growing population in the continent, the migration of people in cities, which then means that we have to find a way in which we manage our water resources to be able to provide water and sanitation for all the citizens that are living in the cities, and also the informal settlement around the cities. So it is therefore important that we build our cities to be resilient. And with that, what it means is we have to find ways in which we use water-sensitive design approaches as we manage or build and plan for our cities. We have to find a way in which we can integrate water resources around the city area in such a way that maybe we are able to even use the cities as catchment to capture, to store, and to use the water efficiently around the cities. And with that background, obviously, as we're talking about water, we're also talking about the overall, this is wastewater, this could be grey water, this could be storm water in the cities. But all we're saying is it is important that as we move forward, going into building resilient cities, we also look at efficient ways that we can capture, store, and use this water efficiently. We are in the city of Cape Town, of course, and we all know about the drought situation that we had in the city, but we have with us the Alderman Ian Nielsen, who's the Deputy Mayor of the City of Cape Town, who's going to be talking to us as our first speaker of the closing plenary about the droughts and so forth in cities and how we can manage them and survive them even. So I'll call up to the stage the Alderman Ian Nielsen, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and on behalf of the City of Cape Town, I'd like to welcome you all here to our beautiful city. We're very proud to be able to host this 5th annual Africa SAN and FSM5 event, and we're looking forward to ongoing constructive engagement and information sharing over the course of the week. So any discussion on sanitation and hygiene will be incomplete without considering the crucial role played by water. Earliest advances in public sanitation saw the construction of latrines and sewage drains to divert the flow of sewage water from ancient cities, and this often required the diversion of water from rivers and lakes and dependent on a regular supply of water in order to function effectively. So today we continue to depend on water as a crucial element of our increasing expanded and sophisticated sanitation systems. But what happens when that water supply is threatened? And across the world, we are seeing the effects of climate change, and for many countries, this means less predictable rainfall patterns. Where cities and regions depend overwhelmingly on surface water supply, there's therefore an increasing threat to the security of the supply. And this was brought home to us here in Cape Town quite recently, as I'm sure you're all aware. I've been asked to share to you some of our experience over the past year in managing one of the most severe droughts that we've been forced to face. Based on historical rainfall records, the drought experience in our catchment area from 2015 to 2017 was a 1 in 590 year event. And because of this, Cape Town made international headlines at the beginning of last year when it was claimed that we were the first major city in the world that could run out of water. I don't think it was an accurate claim, but this is what was being said. In January 2018, projections of the rate at which our dam levels were falling indicated that we could reach a level where emergency measures would have to be implemented, and what became known as Day Zero would be in April 2018. Our modelling was based on a conservative approach due to the unpredictability of rainfall, as well as consumption by other users who share our supply and which we could not control. And on balance, we decided it would be better to plan for the worst case scenario and be proved wrong than to plan more optimistically and be caught short. Fortunately, due to the interventions instituted by the city and the national government, and good winter rainfall in 2018, and the incredible cooperation of our residents, it's 4 million people who really got together and worked together, we were able to avoid that disastrous scenario. And a number of factors enabled us to successfully navigate this unprecedented situation. Since the start of the drought in 2015, the city had instituted progressively tightened water consumption targets and actions. In the summer of 2015, we were consuming an average of 1,200 megalitres of water per day. By July 2016, that had been reduced to 800 megalitres a day, and by July 2017 to 600 megalitres a day. And with the introduction of our level 6 restrictions in February 2018, it dropped even further to around 500 megalitres per day. So within 3 years, we had therefore managed to reduce our water consumption by over 50%. And so this was an extraordinary achievement. But our interventions included steep tariff hikes, the rollout of an extreme pressure management program across the city, the installation of water demand management devices to high users' connections, a leak repair program to minimize water losses, and an extensive communications campaign to encourage a behavioral shift amongst residents. These efforts resulted in our dam levels bottoming out at 20% of their capacity, which was 7% above the level at which we would have had to resort to extreme measures to limit water supply. And when the rains finally came, they exceeded the rainfall figures of the previous 3 years, and our dams slowly began to recover. And so towards the end of last year, our dam levels had been sufficiently replenished that we were able to bring relief to our residents and businesses. And at the end of September, we reduced the water restrictions and associated tariffs, and then further in the end of November, when we reduced them to our level 3 restrictions. And our projections show that at this level, we can accommodate a rise in consumption of up to 650 megalitres per day, and we are still tracking below that threshold. This experience has meant redefining our relationship to water and making sure that the lessons learned over the past year are put to good use. As a starting point, we need to accept that the days of plentiful water supply in Cape Town may very well be over. And like every other city in the world, we are increasingly vulnerable to the effects of rapid urbanization, aging infrastructure, and climate unpredictability. So all of the city's planning around water supply is therefore aimed at making us more resilient and adaptable to the shocks and stresses we are increasingly likely to experience. So after extensive engagement with local and international water and sanitation experts, we've drafted a new water strategy, which is currently out for public participation to ensure a more sustainable and resilient water supply in future. We have developed a strategy that is inclusive, accessible, and evidence-based. Its aim is to ensure water security over the next 10 years and move towards being a water-sensitive city in the next 20 years. The strategy is premised on 5 commitments by the city's administration. 1, safe access to water and sanitation for all our residents. 2, wise use of water by all water users. 3, the development of sufficient, reliable water from diverse sources. 4, working more closely with our partners to guarantee increased and shared benefits from regional water resources. And 5, the transition of Cape Town to a water-sensitive city by 2040. While we continue to rely on rain-fed dams for most of our water, we are committed to adding an additional 300 megalitres per day of new capacity. And this strategy outlines a program for achieving this, which includes the removal of alien vegetation from our catchments, the incremental introduction of seawater desalination, use of groundwater, improved management of stormwater, and the increasing scale of reuse of water. So in order to become more resilient, we plan to introduce new incentives and regulatory mechanisms, as well as looking at the way in which the city invests. New economic opportunities can emerge from an environment where the value of water as a scarce resource is appreciated. And this past year certainly reminded us of the central role of water in our lives, because it's essential to meeting our most fundamental needs. It's vital for productive and resilient natural ecosystems, and central to food, energy, and economic security. Without a sufficient and reliable supply, our quality of life is put at risk. In fact, our very lives could be at risk if we are unable to provide sufficient water for drinking and sanitation purposes. Attaining our strategic vision of a water-sensitive city with wise water use will require the support and buy-in of all the people and institutions living in our city. Each individual person or organization that begins this process to become more resource efficient and resilient helps us as a city to become more efficient and resilient. So events such as this also have a significant role to play in raising awareness of the challenges we face and showing us how to better manage these challenges into the future. So I'm hopeful that we will all make the most of the opportunities that are available here this week to do just that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I hope that most of your questions have been answered. The drought situation in Cape Town has always been talk of the town. Wherever you go globally, they ask you about Cape Town. So I hope that Deputy Mayor managed to assure you or reassure you that we are able to survive the drought through change in existing water resource management, trying to look at alternative water resources, but most importantly, changing the behavior of people in Cape Town, because behavioral change is one of the issues that we spoke about in the morning. And he has mentioned that they were able, the city of Cape Town, just through behavioral change, move from 1,200 megaliters per day to 500. That is very awesome. And I think I just wonder if we would live like we were having the drought in Cape Town every day, how much water we would have saved and not have to live the drought. So I think it's a very good learning exercise to all of us, to all the countries that are represented here, that Cape Town was there. We were all waiting for day zero, which we're happy that we never came to live it. But we can learn something from the Cape Town situation. It's simple things. The way, as we have been saying, the way we think, changing the way we think, changing the way we manage, the kind of partnerships we put in place, that we can be able to survive this. So like we've been saying in the morning, yes, Africa can survive drought. Yes, Africa can be able to provide sanitation and hygiene and clean drinking water to all its citizens. So yes, we can, and we have had a very good case study of Cape Town, and I'm glad and happy that it was part of the speakers, because we always have questions about that. So we've also mentioned the issue of, as the cities are growing, there is a very high chance of having informal settlement. And as we're having informal settlement, as much as they are informal, we still have the obligation or the commitment to provide sanitation and hygiene to the people also living in the informal settlement. And our next speaker, Dr. Kaiser, who is the Executive Director for Water and Waste for the City of Cape Town, is going to be sharing with us the kind of sanitation they've put in place or how they address sanitation in informal settlements in Cape Town. Over you to Dr.
Is this the remote? Right, yes it is. Good afternoon everybody, it's indeed a pleasure to be here. So I want to give you an overview of sanitation and what the City of Cape Town does for sanitation in informal settlements. I'm sure you'll all agree that Cape Town is a beautiful city. It's home to approximately 4.2 million people in about 1.2 million households over an area of about 1,000 square miles. Our access to services are good. When you look at our per capita GDP, we're right there within the BRICS at about $6,000 a person. But it's also a very unequal society. We've got, of the 1.2 million households, approximately 250,000 are informal. That's either in informal settlements or in backyarders. A further 270,000 households are indigent. That means it's a formal household, but it's got a value below 400,000 rand, so it gets its services, especially water and sanitation, at no cost. So our reticulation system is pretty formal in that it's a reticulated network that serves all formal households, business as well as industry, with a network of nearly 9,500 Ks, which takes us approximately from here to Europe. So it is a large network. We've got about 650,000 sewer connections to households as well. The reason why that's so far away from the 1.2 million is that to cluster complexes, there's just a single one. Lots and lots of pump stations, 200,000 manholes. This all goes to 26 wastewater treatment works, which has a capacity of 720 million litres a day. Pre-drought, we treated approximately 660 million litres, and in the height of the drought, that went down to about 450. So, you know, in world standards, and especially in South African standards, we were doing quite well. Then we got to 2013, and Cape Town was then home to the poo wars, which, you know, a little bit like Day Zero, it's not really something that you want to be known for, that people are throwing poo at the airport and at Parliament and places like that, but it really elevated informal sanitation to the headlines of the newspaper. So by its very nature, informal settlements are unplanned. They generally, most of the informal settlements in Cape Town came into existence from about 1996, so it was a year after freedom came to South Africa. And they were settled on areas that were not inhabited, so parks and sports fields and school sites and so on. What happened, though, is that there are serious impediments to providing basic services. Density in our settlements are a huge issue. More than 50% of our settlements have more than 200 households per hectare, and only 5% have less than 100 households per hectare. So if you're going to do a normal greenfields formal housing layout, you need to aim for about 60 households per hectare, and if it's an informal settlement upgrade project, then the maximum is around 85. So most of our settlements, you know, there's really only 5% that is under that. So our challenge is that an enormous number of households need to be relocated before we can improve our services. There are also other risks which we try to work with. The one is in terms of land ownership. A lot of our settlements are on private land, and a municipality can't go and install fixed infrastructure on private land. We can, once we get a landowner's say so, we can, for example, provide standpipes and chemical toilets, but fixed infrastructure is a problem. Then there's, of course, a safety risk. Density leads to a high fire risk because there's no access to vehicles to fight fire. Many of our settlements, and I'll show you in the next slide, are in floodplains. And this is really, people tend to invade in summer when the water level is settled down, and then in winter, they actually realize that they are in a floodplain. Then there are other risks as well, like settlements that are under power lines, which also makes maintenance of infrastructure really difficult, or above servitudes. If you've seen a large pressurized water pipe burst, you can just imagine what that will cause if there are informal structures on top of that. And then finally, we need to have some locality to existing infrastructure for us to connect into the network. So I just want to show you an example of a land invasion. So this was vacant industrial land. It's just south of the airport, and it's privately owned. So in December 2013, that was the picture. In September of 2014, that should be coming on now. Oh, no, you can't see it. There was a huge invasion, and virtually overnight, 5,000 households were built on this area of land. This is what it looked like at the beginning of last year, and as you can see, it has densified quite a lot, especially in the previous green areas, in the hollows. So legally, because the private owners have taken this to court to try to evict people, we can't move on this. So what we've done, as it really is a humanitarian issue, we've provided taps and chemical toilets in the road reserves. But it's very difficult to serve this many households. We have a solid waste service as well, which can operate on private land. So that is just an example of a land invasion, and this happened virtually over a weekend. So we use our GIS system quite a lot in terms of how we manage informal areas now. This is an example of a settlement called SweetHome. Currently, we've got about 300 full flush toilets there that are indicated by one of the markings. There are also chemical toilets, around 200 of those, and container toilets. And the blue dots are the taps. If you see that little black square, the next slide is a blurb of that. So there you can see the individual dots that are on each of the full flush toilets, and then with a bank of toilets, there's typically a tap on each side. So whereas it's difficult to provide better services due to the dense area, it's not ideal living standards for people because there's a lack of access. In this particular area, it's largely electrified, except for a portion of land that is owned by another entity of the state, which we haven't been able to electrify. But maintaining infrastructure in an environment like this is really a challenge, creating fire breaks and everything else. So while we've been aiming as the water and sanitation section in the city to improve the lived experience as far as taps and toilets are concerned, it's really more about housing. So there's currently an in-situ upgrading project on the way, and construction has now started. But if you look at the dates here, the project steering committee was first elected in 2013. It's taken this long to get to a point where we construct. So the picture on the left is the aerial view of the settlement. We're putting in roads and access ways. And at the bottom, that is the temporary relocation area which we have built. In this instance, people won't get full site and service. They will still have to share services, but at least access will be improved and the fire risk will be improved. And over time, people will be able to move to a point where they can build formal households. So what we built our sanitation plan on after the poo wars, or prior to the poo wars, really from approximately 2006, was the national standard that we believe was really written for other areas in South Africa because the basic toilet was a VIP. Now our ground conditions and our high water tables is just not suitable to VIPs. So that was really for easy access to a safe, reliable, private toilet facility which is protected from the weather, ventilated, low smell, hygienic, minimizes the risk of spreading disease, and enables the safe treatment and or removal of human waste and wastewater in an environmentally sound manner. including hygiene. So this has been revised in the 2017 National Norms and Standards, as well as the 2016 Sanitation Policy. What we then did was really to try to increase our coverage of toilets in informal areas. Since 2006, we've been tracking installation of toilets, and as you can see, the bar graph shows the cumulative full flush toilets installed. There was a little bit of an increase after the poo wars, but due to the density and other factors, it is very difficult to just go out. Money isn't the issue. It only costs about 10,000 Rand to install a full flush toilet, but it really is space and the proximity to infrastructure that is the problem. So currently, my department is responsible for just over the 50,000 toilets, which we manage. Let me go to the next page. We manage with an operating cost of approximately 340 million a year. Now, mindful that the time is rapidly running out. So to firstly, let me talk about portable flush toilets. So portable flush toilets are not considered as part of a ratio of 1 toilet to every 5 households. It's seen as a supplementary service. Currently, we have, I think, around 20,000, which we service. Now, we only hand these out for communities who have asked for them. There's a capital outlay of about 1,000 Rand a unit, and the household gets this unit plus a spare container. These are serviced 3 times a week, and disinfectant is added at each service. And this costs us in the region of 11 Rand a unit a service. Then, if you look at all the types of shared toilets, most communities in Cape Town prefer to go for full flush toilets. This isn't without trouble, because every month, we get about 10,000 sewer blockages, and that's largely to dumping within the sewer system. So that's an additional cost. Janitorial services, which we provide at most of our full flush toilets, cost us another 4 million Rand a year. We can only install full flush toilets on unencumbered land where there is bulk services in place and where there is space available. At the moment, 46% of our shared toilets are full flush toilets, and we aim to increase that as time goes by and we manage to de-densify our settlements and find more space for full flush toilets. The next most toilets are the container toilet, which is really a 100-litre container, which is also charged with a fluid, cleaned 3 times a week. The cost of cleaning that is approximately 7 Rand a service per toilet. And we use these where we can't get vehicle access. So in difficult areas that are really dense, where people need to go in and pick up a container and carry it out and bring in a clean container. And at the moment, that's about 26% of our shared toilets. And then our chemical toilets is the most expensive toilets, but it's also generally the quickest to roll out, because we don't pay a capital cost for that. We include that in the cost of servicing. So we pay around 77 Rand for each chemical toilet to be serviced, and that is for 3 times a week. But then in instances such as what happened in the poo wars, where a lot of our chemical toilets were burned on the highway to cause a blockade, then that's at the contractor's risk rather than the city's risk, and he needs to replace those quickly. So those are the main toilets that we use. What we decided to do was to centralize where we manage our fecal sludge. And I hope many of you yesterday took advantage to go on the field trip to Borcherd's Quarry, which is shown in red. It was first opened back in 1974, and there's been lots of advances there. That the latest work is just complete, and the capacity of that plant is now around 40 million litres a day. For compliance standards in terms of effluent, pre-drought we were meeting between 80 and 90%. During construction and the drought, it fell to just below 50%, and now we're back to inching up towards 60% as we commission infrastructure. Effluent is discharged into the Salt River. We're not using return effluent at the moment since the golf club close by closed down. But we are planning to, in future, if we use sufficient water on phase 2 of the Cape Flats Aquifer, which is a groundwater project to make us more robust to droughts, we're going to have managed aquifer recharge in the region of 8 million litres a day, and the airport has also asked for some water. So much of the poo wars were really about the treatment of people and the lack of dignity in managing fecal sludge. So we're very proud of our FSM facility at Borcherd's Quarry. I've been in this role since 2012, and around the poo war time, this was just an idea in somebody's head, because over a weekend we were instructed to roll out loads and loads of portable flush toilets, and there was a Sturkis building at Borcherd's Quarry, so it was very much a manual task, and it was not pleasant that people had to really come into close contact with it. So this is now really making a factory out of cleaning sludge. I think I mentioned that we're planning both in northern and in southern biosolids facility in future. So our plans are still to have waterborne sanitation and a centralized service rather than a decentralized service. And I heard what Jay was saying in the previous session, and I'm sure that there are commercial opportunities, but in a municipal setting, there's always another crisis, and politics and social interaction really do distract a lot of attention away from this. So we look for technical answers sometimes, which may be more costly, but we have to improve the services while in the long term we want to upgrade settlements and provide better services at all levels. So the future outlook for sanitation in Cape Town, we've had a couple of structural changes, and informal settlement sanitation is in transit back to the water and sanitation branch at the moment, which gives us great joy because we think that will yield the best results. It is our first commitment, as Alderman Nielsen mentioned, in our strategy to improve the access to safe water and sanitation for the most vulnerable of Cape Town's people. Then we're very keen to pursue partnerships and leapfrog where we can. We've always been quite jealous of eThekwini and all the great partnerships that they have, and we certainly are open for business. The drought caused a little bit of a distraction for all of us, but now we're absolutely focused on improving our toilets in informal areas. And then mainly, it is to improve the lived experience. We spend a lot of money on sanitation services in informal areas, and it would be great if the lived experience matched the amount of money that we spend. So we are committed to improve that in future. But we certainly have learned that technical solutions don't just work. You need to engage and engage and engage some more. This picture here, I don't know if there was a site visit out to a settlement called Masi, which is close to Fishhook. This was piloted over a canal to provide showers and a number of toilets. And we're very proud of it, and we would like to replicate it across the city. Again, it wasn't cheap, but compared to other infrastructure, toilets really aren't that expensive if you already have a reticulation system. So we will continue to try to innovate and look for new solutions to improve the lived experience. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kaiser. I think you'll agree with me that from the two case studies that were presented, be it the drought, how the city of Cape Town managed to get out of the drought and prevent the day zero, and also the way they handled the provision of sanitation and hygiene in an informal settlement that really was not something that was planned. I think the way you reacted, the way you changed, the way you manage your resources and putting this things in place it's very good, and it can be a lesson to the rest of the continent. And of course, we'll be willing to share that with the continent as to how they managed to do this. But it shows that they're also reflecting on the issue of partnership, the importance of the partnerships you have when you're trying to resolve these challenges that are coming when you're not prepared for them. But again, it says we can be able to do these things. We can be able to manage these situations as Africans if we really put our heads to it. We create proper partnership, and we shift when we need to shift in the way we think and we plan, so that we can manage and be able to achieve what is necessary. And obviously, as the cities grow or the population in Africa increases, there's also an issue of pollution that we're dealing with. And we need to, as much as we're trying to address other issues, make sure that we're also trying to make our continent clean. And one of or our last speaker of today is Professor Cherry, who is the director for the Administrative Staff College of India. He's going to share with us a program, or a program that is called the Swachh Bharat Mission of India, which is basically saying how is the government of India going to make sure that they clean India, the cities, the streets, the infrastructures, and everything. So we thought that it would be very important for us as African audience and others to listen to this presentation, so that we can learn how we can, as Africans, also maybe adopt some of the learnings that they have in India as they were trying to clean the streets, the infrastructures, and the city of India. So we'll call on stage Professor Cherry to come and share with us the Swachh Bharat mission, their experiences, the best practices, what you have learned, and also the challenges that you experienced as you were rolling out this program. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Cape Town. I'm going to speak apart from Swachh Bharat mission. The biggest challenge for India right now, and also for the rest of the world, is how the waste from the toilets, the fecal waste, is handled and how it should be handled. So bulk of my conversation would be on how India is actually organizing itself to deal with the fecal waste management apart from building toilets. I think for the benefit of everybody, I think India is like a giant elephant, Bollywood style, colorful, no doubt about it. It has about 29 states, 7 union territories. Each of these states is pretty complex, both in terms of politics, in terms of socio-economic fabric, and sometimes each of these states could be a country by itself. For example, one of our partners, Center for Science and Environment, works in state of Uttar Pradesh, which is 4 times the size of South Africa. So we're looking at a very complex, huge situation here, and one has to recognize that sanitation is a state subject. It's not a federal subject, it's a state subject. So moving this agenda, particularly across the country in a seamless manner, particularly the sanitation, which is also involving the culture, which is involving the behavior aspect, is quite a daunting challenge before any governments and also for India. Now, in 2011, the sanitation, if I may say so, was in a state of crisis. It was in a nightmarish situation. In fact, 19% of urban population were not really having access to individual household toilets, and many of them were on, almost 70% of them were on on-site sanitation. So the sewer systems were near absent, except in big metropolitan cities, and bulk of the citizens, urban population, were on on-site sanitation. There was rampant open defecation, and more than 80% of the wastewaters, the fecal waste, contaminated wastewaters, was actually let out into the environment, causing public health crisis as well as a direct impact on the economic well-being. In fact, the urban poor were at a very disadvantaged situation in this context, and this was pre-Swachh Bharat or Clean India Mission program. The whole FSM agenda was not on the radar of the national policy at the time. The waste waters were, the fecal waste was indiscriminately disposed, and it was a big challenge before the nation because it had a direct impact on the public health as well as on the economic well-being of the country. So given that, I would like to take you through the trajectory of change that has happened. In fact, when we met at Chennai for FSM 4, in fact, I would say that the FSM agenda was absent on the National Urban Sanitation Policy. In fact, except for 2 to 3 states, bulk of the states had no policy on FSM, except for states like Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, and Orissa. Few of them had a policy on FSM, but the country as such was actually, many states had no policy on FSM. There was only one demonstration project for the whole country, and it was actually so sought after within the country that this was actually supported by the Gates Foundation at that time, and it has become a sort of a pilgrimage for sanitation professionals. And the open defecation was actually at that stage in 2017 was actually in work in progress. So given that, what has happened now? So as I speak, what is the current situation in India? In fact, it's very, very compelling to see the change. More than 5 million toilets were built, and both in terms of individual household toilets and public toilets, and more than 3,600 municipalities are free from open defecation. But most importantly, the FSM journey has taken a dramatic change between FSM 4 and now FSM 5, where we are right now. In fact, the national government has issued a very strong policy on FSM, and 19 out of 29 states and union territories actually have introduced FSM policy and operational guidelines. Most important thing is that the public sector actually institutions are funding more than 442 FSTPs, fecal sludge treatment plants across municipalities in the country. And the national government has introduced a sub-program for exclusively for fecal waste management. So this change was actually quite compelling and dramatic, and sometimes we wonder how this change has happened. What was the reason, and what are the lessons we can learn? What are the lessons we can share for the rest of the world, and also what we can learn from others in the context of the journey that we are right now in? In fact, I'm very happy to inform you that between FSM 4 and now FSM 5, 500 million population are actually under the ambit of safe fecal sludge management journey. In fact, 6 states are actually building more than 450 fecal sludge treatment plants, and they have a FSM program in place in terms of regulation, in terms of some of the states have scheduled desludging agenda. So this change is actually quite palpable between the two events that we are talking about, between these 2 years of journey that we are discussing about. Now, this shift is something very, very interesting. In fact, one has to recognize that the shift of policy needle across different states, having different politics, different cultures, different, I would say, economic levels, is not pretty easy. There's a significant increase in public finance for FSM, and also how do we build this capacity? So these are the 3 fundamental challenges that any country, any context would experience. So how India went about this change is something I think the world community would be interested in knowing. There are 4 fundamental pillars for this change, for this trajectory of change. One is a collective voice. And this is, I think, is the most critical piece that India actually managed to crack it. And this is a voice that was created by instituting what is called a Fecal Sludge and Septage Management Alliance. We call it as NFSSM Alliance, which was actually initially supported. In fact, this was convened and supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, having more than 30-odd very, very strong institutions and also personalities within this alliance. The purpose of this alliance is to evolve a common voice to deal with FSM, to communicate the importance of FSM both at the policy level as well as at the practice level. So this NFSSM Alliance has become a community of practice, to a collective voice to drive the change. I think that's a fundamental pillar on which this Indian trajectory that we were discussing about actually navigated. So this alliance actually comprises both national and international players, organizations, and they have a common agenda of how do you pursue, how do we make sure that FSM agenda gets nudged across the national, state, and the local level. They work very closely, this alliance work very closely with the national ministries, state departments, and the local municipalities. The second important thing is a collaborative action. Oftentimes, these very eminent institutions and organizations, they work for multiple purposes. At times, they don't have a common thinking. So what NFSSM Alliance did was to create a collaborative action for change. I think that's a very important, I would say, development in the country, that this collaborative action actually shortened the implementation time, shortened the learning curves. We were able to crack many problems together rather than individually. So I think this is a second important lesson, that collaborative action is very critical in any context. The third important thing is, how do you work with the governments? So the alliance would actually manage to work with multiple tiers of government, because the alliance partners have the bandwidth as well as the credibility to work with the national, state, and local level. In fact, the national ministry, we have established what is called a program management unit, which actually helps the policy nudge. At the same time, some of our alliance partners work at the state level, providing implementation support. So I think working with the governments actually built the trust, and the governments are actually speaking to each other, and because of that, they are actually bringing out money onto the table and started investing in the whole sanitation agenda, because they feel that there is a common agenda which is evolving in the country, and they can trust the journey that the governments have actually started taking together. The most important thing, that lessons for us, is when we are starting the journey was actually the alliance thought about the scale from the day one. We haven't started about thinking about a pilot, but we started thinking about a scale from day one. So what do we mean by designing or working at a scale? Number one, working with both national and state governments is very important to achieve scale in India. The second most important reason is that when you are looking at scale, most of the public sector entities do not have the bandwidth in terms of capacities to implement projects. So public-private partnership is a very important aspect as a part of this scale agenda, both in terms of desludging industry as well as the treatment and disposal and recycling industry. Third important thing is looking at multiple innovative approaches. Co-treatment is one of the approaches, that is combined treatment. The sewage as well as septage is treated together wherever there is a STP available. So this is a third important aspect of scale agenda. Very important aspect is about building capacities. At a pan-India level, capacity building of all the states are taken up in a coherent way. There is a common agenda, common syllabus, common voice, and common messaging has been sent out across all the 29 states through capacity building programs, through partner organizations. And equally important is messaging. The so-called behavior change communication strategy. In fact, we work with organization and a technical organization such as ours cannot imagine working with BBC Media, but for the alliance that we collaborated with. So BBC Media came up with some innovative messaging methods. We localize it, and then this messaging actually being sent out at the local level, at the national level, and this is actually going to be, it's already a national television program right now in the country. So a combination of these behavior change communications actually led to a very compelling outcome in a short span of 2 years. So what's the outcome like? The outcome is in terms of $700 million in septage and wastewater treatment. And in fact, for small and medium towns, a separate mission was created with $100 million, in fact, $100 million coming from the state budgets. It's very, very important. Instead of waiting for the national government to come up with a program, many states have pledged support for this and initiated projects either through public sector financing or through public-private partnership. And a combined treatment plans, we have about 900 STPs. Now efforts are made to co-treat some of these things. So I think the outcome is very, very compelling. The approach that we followed actually in a short span of 2 years actually led to a very, very interesting outcome, which can be scaled up and replicated in many, many contexts. So the most interesting thing, that development that happened, is that the national government has integrated FSM as a part of the city rating agenda, which is actually 4,000 municipalities compete for the rating of the national government, which is a very coveted rating system, and FSM is a part of it. So that actually triggered a significant change in terms of the impact. Now, in fact, last year when Mr. Gates actually introduced a challenge about fecal waste, this lady is actually, she's a mayor of a city. She took upon the challenge and converted, demonstrating that I've taken up this challenge, I've converted the feces into a biochar. So that's what she is trying to communicate. So it's actually a reality, and this can be scaled up, and it is being scaled up. So what's the journey like for the next 2 years? So I'm actually introduced what is called a blue color for 6. You had you had red color this time, and you had I think green color last time. I think we should have blue color, because water security is very, very important for FSM progress. So FSM 6 is going to be very, very interesting. What's the agenda for India? What's the alliance is looking at it? We are very focused on SDG 6.2. But how do we translate this into reality? So the alliance started working with the national government in what is called the National Urban Sanitation Policy 2.0, which is actually a policy looking at 2030. How do we get not only sanitation, but how do you get grey water management? How do you promote wastewater recycling? These are actually components of the policies. There are well-defined indicators. This policy is actually at the draft stage. The national government is likely to be announcing it hopefully very shortly. Now, how do we plan to get there? This is a very important agenda for us. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock, the alliance is meeting to discuss how do we get there while we are at FSM 5. So the 700-day agenda, as we call, the next 2-year agenda, is about fixing the institutions to deliver this non-sewer sanitation and FSM. This is one of the weak link in the whole system. What sort of institutions we need to have to make sure that this whole FSM agenda gets implemented across 7,000 municipalities across the country with safety, with quality, and these are the points that we are discussing. Technological innovations. We can't go in a sort of a business as usual manner. We need to start looking at technological innovations, and there is a very strong enabling condition for technological innovations. In fact, the transformative path is actually ready, because the governments have invested in the enabling conditions. The question is now, it is time that the next 2 years, the cities, the states, and the national government in the country have to start looking at how do we bring in disruptive technologies, how do we bring in innovations, both in terms of processes, in terms of technologies, is something which we would be looking at it. The most important thing is, how do you create a business? How do you create an industry? So the alliance started talking about an apex body, both from the municipality side as well as from the industry side. The work is already started. Can we create an industry association? In fact, we were talking to Boda sometime in, I think, when we met in Leh. In fact, sir, we started the work and we have commissioned, hopefully in the next 1 month or so, we would have an idea what is called Indian Fecal Sludge Septage Management Association from the industry side. So we need to have an industry association. We were looking at that. Financing is a critical bit of piece of work. And in fact, the Alliance is working with 15th Finance Commission for a greater allocation for FSM agenda and also developing strong private sector capacities. I must say that India is one of the few countries went for public-private partnership under hybrid annuity model in developing FSTPs. In fact, hopefully one of our partners, Tide Technocrats, should become a unicorn in the near future. So the way they are winning the contracts. So finally, I think I would like to stop here by saying that quality assurance is another piece of work the Alliance is seized upon, because without quality, the impact and the outcomes that we are expecting is not going to work. In fact, the work has already begun. So to summarize, all I can say is that the journey is on, journey will continue, and we would like to see you and we would like to reflect on this when all of us meet again at FSM 6. But there is a lot to learn from all of you, a lot to learn from this event, and a lot to offer from India's side to the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all our speakers. I'm not going to try and summarize what happened today because it's been a very long day, but I just want to make one point so that it's something that you can take with. I think there are lots of commitments, declarations, strategies, and policies in the continent that really agrees. So we all agree that sanitation, its dignity, sanitation and access to sanitation and hygiene, and also drinking water is a human right and all that, and we have beautiful policies in place, but what matters is the enabling environment to be able to implement the policies. From the morning, we've heard about the Ngo commitment, for example. We've heard about the sanitation unicorn that could transform Africa into this mega market of sanitation solutions. We've heard today about the city of Cape Town and Indian case studies. But what it matters, what it boils down to is really with these policies, these commitments, the political commitment, we need an enabling environment so that we can be able to move forward. That's just what I want to take for today. And I would like to then thank our speakers. If we can just extend a round of applause to our speakers who did a very good job. To thank you, the audience. You managed to really stay. It is late, but you came and you stayed, you listened to our speakers. We thank you for respecting that and showing them the respect. And of course, we will then now close the day for today. Please take your time I know you're tired, explore Cape Town a bit. It's a beautiful city. You have a lot of time to can do that. Please try to have some fun tonight. And then we will meet again tomorrow morning in the plenary session that will start at 9 o'clock. Thank you very much.